A few weeks ago, Sherry and I saw a movie I highly recommend titled Pressure. You may have heard of it. It's about the D-Day invasion of June 6, 1944, and the precise meteorological planning that it demanded. It's another stunning reminder of how much we owe in gratitude to the men and women who, in this case, planned and executed the Normandy invasion that changed the course of the world of World War II. And once again, I was in awe of the cost of the life I enjoy, paid in blood by boys on a beach 82 years ago. And on this 250th anniversary weekend, we need to remember that because we forget. But also in this pessimistic age, we seem to have forgotten. If there's one thing we in America are sure of, it's how bad we think things are all the time. USA Today had an article, Nurturing Hope in a Dismal Time. And the first sentence was, is this a bummer time or what? And I thought a lot about what I wanted to say for a number of months to our church this 250th anniversary weekend. And I kept coming back to a sermon one of my mentors, Bob Russell, helped me with almost 40 years ago and is still relevant today. I say he helped me with, he mostly wrote it. On this 4th of July weekend, I want to use the story of Absalom in the Old Testament to talk about a problem in our day. Rampant pessimism. The story of David's charismatic son has two critical lessons to teach us this 250th birthday weekend. One is pessimism is popular, and the other is optimism is not optional. First, pessimism is popular, and it always will be. King David's son Absalom caused him a lot of grief as he tapped into the people's discontent. Now 2 Samuel 14:25 describes Absalom and his striking appearance. In all Israel there was not a man so highly praised for his handsome appearance as Absalom. From the top of his head to the sole of his foot there was no blemish in him. Whenever he cut the hair of his head, he used to cut his hair once a year because it became too heavy for him. He would weigh it, and its weight was 200 shekels by the royal standard. That amounts to 5 pounds of hair when Absalom got his hair cut. Absalom would have made a great 70s or 80s rock star. He had a striking appearance. He also had great charisma, but he was uncontrollable and vicious. He was determined that one day the crown of his father David would rest on his own head, and he was not willing to wait for the appointed time when his father would die and God's will would be enacted. But cleverly, ruthlessly, he began to undermine his father. Look at these words from 2 Samuel 15, verses 1 to 6. In the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses with 50 men to run ahead of him. He would get up early and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" And he would answer, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." And then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there's no representative of the king to hear you." And Absalom would add, "If only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or a case could come to me, and I would see they receive justice." Verse 5 says, also whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. "I'm one of the people." Absalom behaved in this way toward all the Israelites who came to the king asking for justice, and so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. We know that a good politician doesn't have to have a lot of solutions. A good politician can win the hearts of the people if he can just articulate the problems and identify with the common man. Well, Absalom was a sponge for the people's pessimism. He exaggerated their problems, and so they thought that he was the man who could change things. Now, maybe it was time for a change. David was becoming old and inefficient, and they would listen to this new charmer and welcome in the new order that he promised. So the conspiracy of pessimism grew. The scriptures say Absalom's followers kept on increasing. And the Bible goes on to say that his promises were empty and the people were totally deceived and they regretted following Absalom. David had his faults, but with all of his faults, he was an angel compared to the monster he had for a son. The people learned too late that Absalom's kiss of pessimism was the kiss of betrayal. The cure was worse than the disease. He preyed on the people's discontent only to promote himself. The revolution fell short, and it resulted in tragedy to his followers. Years ago, the late author J. Wallace Hamilton wrote a book called Ride the Wild Horses, in which he dealt with this theme of pessimism. He wrote, "Absalom is the classic illustration of the principle of pessimistic subversion, the undermining process that works like evil leaven in society, feeding on discontent, creating dissatisfaction, and stirring up criticism. Thoughtless, thankless people can easily have their heritage undermined by failing to appreciate it." You see, God has given to each one of us the critical faculty because the world is tainted with corruption, and we need it. Used rightly, that critical faculty can be a blessing. Our nation is in existence today because our forefathers were critical of their treatment in England, and we are glad that they were and did something about it. It's a terrible thing when people have the right to criticize taken from them. But fault finding can go too far, can't it? It can become lopsided. It can cause us to lose our joy, and it can cause us to lose perspective. Hamilton wrote of two women who were on their way home from a concert in which the violinist had given a near perfect performance. "Wasn't that magnificent?" the one woman said. "No," the other mumbled. "The way he blew his nose after the first number just ruined the whole evening for me." And there are people like that. They habitually miss the music of life only because they hear the blowing of the nose. They concentrate on the 2% that is bad in any given situation, and they miss the 98% that is right. That was the fault of David's people. They allowed their discontent with certain things that were wrong with David's regime to blind them completely of those things that were positive, which were many. Thus, they opened the door to Absalom, the saboteur, and they had a civil war on their hands. Now, why is it we are prone to pessimistic attitudes? I can give you a few reasons. One is uncontrolled ambition. We Americans are such a competitive, achievement-oriented people. No matter how much we have, no matter how much we achieve, it's never enough. We always crave more, we expect worse, and we fear losing what it is we've achieved. Another reason is unrealistic expectations. Most Americans have such an idealistic view of life from childhood that when something minor is wrong, we become cynical. For instance, I've often heard people say, "I really don't want to be rich. I just want to have enough where I can pay my bills and not have to worry all the time. I want to be able to take trips and enjoy them and not have all this pressure and anxiety." They're kind of like the guy who was asked, "Would you rather be poor and happy or rich and miserable?" And he thought about that for a moment, and then he said, "I'd rather be semi-rich and moderately depressed." We are so unrealistic in our expectations. Another reason is undetermined purpose. We really don't know what our ultimate goal is in life, and it's hard to be content in life's journey when you don't know where you're going or what you really want. One guy said honestly, "I'm not sure what I want in life, but I'm sure I don't have it." That's why the second lesson of this is optimism is not optional. Pessimism is always popular, but optimism, no matter how dire the circumstances, is not optional. It is imperative. The old speaker and author Zig Ziglar used to say, "We all need a checkup from the neck up to eliminate stinking thinking." On this birthday weekend, I think we need optimism for our nation. No matter where you are in the political spectrum, I think we'll all admit that there are many things wrong with our country. All kinds of problems, serious problems. But we allow our godless Absaloms to undermine the original vision and the unique system of our forefathers by focusing all the time on what is wrong. Atheistic communism was successful in infiltrating country after country in the 20th century by professing to be a friend of the oppressed, much like Absalom. Like Absalom, they oozed with sympathy to the common man. If we were in control, things would be different. Power for the people, justice for the working man, equality for fill in the blank. Many years ago, John Lennon wrote a song entitled Imagine. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try it. There's no hell below us, above us only sky. And went on to say, imagine there are no possessions, no country loyalties, no religion. There's nothing to fight for. We could all live together in peace. And you might say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. And that sounds good on the surface. It's an amazing song, quite honestly. That message sounds good on the surface. Who doesn't want world peace? But the kiss of Absalom is the kiss of betrayal, and it denies reality. For example, every country where an atheistic socialist system has been embraced, that country has been found wanting. Winston Churchill, as only he could say, astutely observed, a socialist system will only work in two places, heaven where it is not needed and hell where they already have it. Capitalism is the unequal distribution of blessing. Socialism is the equal distribution of misery, and communism is just socialism with a gun at your back. Now, it is not just political Absaloms who exploit pessimism and negativism. There are media Absaloms who undermine our situation by focusing on the negative. Now, I know it is the negative that gets eyeballs and gets likes, and that it is the spectacular and usually the tragic and negative that gets attention. But it creates an imbalance of reality. USA Today, in that same article I referenced earlier, had a sub-article titled, "Why's the USA So Glum?" Opinion expert Everett Ladd says, U.S. satisfaction is very low now, but polling has shown wild swings historically due to many factors, including media. He says media produces more volatility and mood swings. It puts the country on an emotional roller coaster given the inherent ways it covers national events. It says this is what's important, this is what we need to focus on right now. Here's crisis 1, here's crisis 2. And we have found that a generalized dissatisfaction about certain things remote has been an increasing characteristic of the media age. There's a whole series of measures I call pop cynicism. Now, that article I referenced right there and before was written 30 years before social media. It was written in the early 90s. You see, this constant harangue of what is wrong undermines our heritage as a country. One man was tired of the misrepresentation of reality in major media, so he started his own news station. He said most of the blame for what is happening in America can be blamed on the communications industry. The major networks are the worst enemies this country ever had because of the propaganda that they put into people's minds. That man was Ted Turner, who started a network not renowned for its journalistic credibility, CNN. And we have networks on both sides of the political spectrum that we would say the same. Frankie Schaeffer, the theologian and philosopher, said the so-called free press is not really free. They put forth a worldview all their own and effectively censor out or hopelessly stereotype all of their views which conflict with their own. I think there's a degree of truth in that. And that doesn't even acknowledge social media. Let's understand that negativism attracts, but it is not the whole story. In recent weeks, we have been visited by hundreds of thousands of foreigners who came into our country to watch the World Cup soccer tournament. Did you see how many said, "This is amazing. I can't believe America." People from Great Britain, from France, Western comrades of ours who are saying, what we've heard about America is distorted. This is amazing. Now that's anecdotal, but I think it's accurate. According to figures by economist Dr. Craig Aronoff, think of these factors. He said for example, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, life expectancy at birth in the United States has steadily climbed over the long term, moving from around 68 years in 1950 to over 77 years today. Infant mortality rates have also dramatically decreased over the same period. Or what about economic mobility and income? Historical long-term data from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis shows that real gross domestic product per capita, which measures average economic output and standard of living, has grown exponentially over the last few decades, allowing Americans to afford more goods, services, and technological advances. Speaking of technological access, research from the Pew Research Center tracks the widespread adoption of modern conveniences. Today, nearly 97% of Americans own smartphones, and access to high-speed internet provides a vastly higher level of connectivity and access to information compared to previous generations. But what about education? According to the National Center of Education Statistics, the percentage of American adults completing high school and attaining a bachelor's degree or higher has reached all-time highs, with over 90% of adults completing high school today. Now some of you are sitting there saying, yeah, but. You're the one that needs to hear this message. Not everything is bad. I remember years ago, when journalist Charles Krauthammer wrote, following the victory of the Gulf War, words that struck me then and apply today. I quote, "We are today experiencing some good old American pessimism. It is a minute past our finest hour. The parades are over, things are tough, America is down, fine. We're entitled to a bit of wallow. But let's be realistic. There is not a refugee in the world who does not dream of America. Not a newly liberated nation not eager to emulate our institutions. Not a country on earth that would not trade places with the most economically, militarily, and politically powerful nation on earth. There are 9 years left in the American century." This was written in 1991. "And no nation is in a better position to seize the 21st. Cheer up." Not everything is wrong with this country. Some serious things are, and we need to fix them. But in my opinion, which that and $1.99 will buy you a coffee at Speedway, America needs reform spiritually, but not revolution. You don't cure dandruff with a guillotine. Now, I'm not saying we walk around like a bunch of Pollyannas, boy, there's nothing wrong with our country, everything's wonderful. It's sort of like the guy who fell from a 30-story window and halfway down he said, well, everything's okay so far. I remember an old poem titled "Going to the Dogs," and it reads as follows: "My grandpa notes the world's worn cogs and says, we're going to the dogs." His grandpa in a hut of logs swore things were going to the dogs. His grandpa in the Irish bogs vowed things were going to the dogs. His grandpa dressed in caveman's togs moaned things are going to the dogs. Now this is all I have to state: the dogs have had an awful wait. We need critics. Somebody said the optimist invented the airplane and the pessimist the parachute. We need both. And we need people who have discerning gifts and wisdom gifts, who will be unthreatening and will be able to point out potential problems in advance. It is absolutely critical in a republic that that takes place. We need journalism. But after we've evaluated the criticism of the realists, we need to focus on the 98% that is positive and be grateful for what we have. It's a shame the way many of us have allowed negative cynics to smother our joy and our appreciation, our enthusiasm and our optimism. Critics are needed, but critics don't build things, they inspect things. Great movements, countries, teams, organizations, churches, communities, families are built by an enthusiastic spirit, a realistic strategy, and a positive faith in God's goodness. I love that quote: "Realism is idealism that has gone through the fire and gotten purified. Cynicism is idealism that has gone through the fire and gotten burned." We need realism, optimistic realism. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is Nehemiah. Nehemiah in the Old Testament is a good example, was rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem, the security system of Jerusalem. And he got so involved in the work But he wasn't without his critics. The critics, Sanballat and Tobiah, ridiculed, and they said, if a fox hits that wall, it's going to knock it down. And they threatened him, and they opposed, and they complained. And Nehemiah just kept on building. And finally they sent him a letter, and they asked him to come down into the valley of Ono to discuss their complaints. Nehemiah said, oh no to oh no. His answer was classic. He said, I'm doing a great work and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? You know, it's a terrible mistake to allow the pessimists to stop progress or exaggerate the negative until we get to the point where we fail to give thanks enthusiastically for the 98% that is right. Even a clock that has stopped working is right twice a day. And we need this for our nation. We also need this for our church and for ourselves. We are so blessed here. But we undermine our happiness frequently because of a subversive force in the spirit of Absalom. So many people are unhappy with the way they're living simply because of a negative focus. For instance, you can go to any place in America, and if you listen to people, you can find out that they're complaining about their climate. They're complaining about their city. You might know some people who've moved away from our area and have moved north, and they'll say, boy, up here we miss the mild weather down south in Ohio. Or down here in the south, we would like to have an occasional snow like you have in Dayton. It's so hot in Florida. Or down here in Florida, we miss the changing of the seasons. Or we're on the East Coast, and boy, do we miss the warmth of the people in the Bible Belt. They're so friendly. Or we're in the plains, and we miss the diverse beauty of the Ohio landscape. Or we're out here in California now, and we miss the space you can find out in the Midwest. And here we are, I guess, living in the garden spot of the world, and we complain all the time about Sinus Valley, and there aren't enough enjoyable things to do in Dayton, or on and on and on. You see, many of us have the riches of life in every realm all around us, but our eyes fail to see them because we magnify the difficulties. Our lives are undermined because we fail to recognize the good in what we have. Divorce courts tell this story all the time. How many marriages break up because the grace of optimism and appreciation has broken down? Mates magnify each other's faults. And that's all they see, that physical deficiency, that personality trait, that inconsistency. And eventually they criticize and complain to the point that they can't see anything good to it. Love is undermined. The home is broken, and Absalom has stolen a precious heritage. I like the man who said to his wife of 40 years, Martha, when I played football and got knocked out, I awakened on the sidelines, and there you were holding my hand. And Martha, after we got married and I had pneumonia, there you were in the room stroking my brow. And Martha, when my grandmother passed away, there you were helping me in my grief right by my side. And Martha, when I was in the hospital and I had that operation, I awakened from the anesthesia, and there you were holding my hand. Martha, you're just bad luck. If you're looking for a perfect country, if you're looking for a perfect church, a perfect place to live, a perfect mate, perfect children, you're going to live a miserable life. Somewhere along the line, we have got to give God thanks enthusiastically and consistently for the 95 to 98% that is good that we have, and learn the wisdom of Paul's philosophy in Philippians 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again, rejoice. Brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And what have you ever learned or received or heard from me or seen me put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. That is not shallow, syrupy, positive thinking mush. That is biblical. That is the basis of Christian thinking. That is the key to an abundant life. That is the key to maintaining the precious heritage God has placed right in your lap. You see, there's only one perfect person, and that person is Jesus Christ. He's the main reason I'm optimistic about America. And on this very special weekend, we're thankful for those who pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to establish the great American experiment that is still going on. But Jesus Christ went beyond that. He left heaven for you. He went to hell for you and me. John 15:13, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You see, Jesus was not an Absalom. He was the anti-Absalom. He didn't give promises he couldn't deliver so he could have all the power and authority. He gave up all power and authority and laid his life down. He took our place so that we have the gift of his righteousness available to us today. And that's why I have hope for America. It's because of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. We hope that you have a great 250th weekend. But more than that, we hope that this summer you put your hope and trust in Jesus Christ.